Ian Lee has been listening along with me. He is the associate professor at Carleton University Sprott School of Business. Good morning to you, Ian. How is this bridge financing going to help Canadian companies during this period?
Well, the more that the Minister Morneau, unpacks the details, the more skeptical I'm becoming. I'll explain that. I'm a former lender. Many years ago, for 9 years, in the fourth largest branch of the Bank of Montreal, I was a mortgage manager and a commercial credit officer, lending millions and millions of dollars to business. And it's a very complex process. You have to evaluate all kinds of things. And so why I'm mentioning that is in this crisis, they set up the individual support for individuals as very minimalist. You know, you have to be unemployed and you have to have a minimum income of, I think it's $5,000. And if you meet those two, you automatically qualify. In this instance, with the LEEFF and the famous conditions that he's attaching, that very clearly suggests discretion. Somebody is somewhere in the government administering the program has to evaluate what is an adequate as opposed to an inadequate environmental plan. When they say that wages for executives can't be increased significantly, the moment you put in these words like significant, well, someone's got to decide if it's significant or insignificant.
Right. It's subject to interpretation. So who then would qualify for this loan?
Well, in theory, under the conditions, and I've got them written out here on my screen, theoretically, most companies won't qualify on one of those grounds. But my other point, Marcia, is that this is going to slow down the process. Minister Morneau said the money's going to be flowing out the door in a day or two. I don't believe there's any way that any prudent, responsible public servant can evaluate all of the documentation that's going to be necessary to determine if each company, in fact, has met the conditions. This could take, and I'm saying this as a former loan officer, this could take days or even weeks to evaluate all the paper that these companies are going to have to present to demonstrate that they've met the conditions. This is what we call red tape. And there's a ton of red tape here that's going to slow down the process, slow down the money getting out to the companies that need the help. That's why I'm becoming increasingly skeptical about this program.
Would this loan program have possibly helped Air Canada? Air Canada, of course, announcing late last week that 20,000 people were being laid off.
I mean, in theory, in the sense that, he said, Minister Morneau said that you must need the money. There's a minimum amount you must need. And he's been very clear that you can't get it from private sources. So then you've got to prove to the people approving evaluating your application that you couldn't get the money from the private markets. I'm not even sure Air Canada could prove that, because Air Canada is still a viable company that could presumably go to the bond markets and go to raise money in the private markets. So I'm not even sure if this could help with all of these conditions attached, whether or not Air Canada would qualify.
And lastly, I want to ask you, Ian, because the finance minister was asked about real estate. Obviously, there has been a slowdown because people have been in lockdown. What are you hearing from the government about helping out the housing sector? What are you listening for in the days and weeks to come?
Well, I'm going to be watching on the CMHC proposal suggestion going from a 5% to a 10% down payment. But just to be clear, that will only apply to future applications. Their problem is those young people who took out mortgages. I say young because it's correlated to young people, first-time homeowners who bought a house in the last 5 years. They tend to borrow to the max, to the maximum that they're allowed to. And so when there's a correction in the market, downturn like that, they're the ones most vulnerable. And Marcia, they're the ones that are on the hook. That CMHC is on the hook for. The taxpayers of Canada own CMHC. CMHC is guaranteed these loans. And so if a significant number of loans go delinquent and the banks turn around and say, CMHC, we're here to collect our guarantee because these people have defaulted, the CMHC and thus the government of Canada could be on the hook for billions and billions of dollars of defaulting and defaulted mortgages that are now delinquent.
Ian Lee, thank you so much for being part of our coverage today. Appreciate your analysis. We'll speak with you again soon.